Hi everyone again and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Noah from Innovative Family Wellness, and as many of the kids know me, Dr. Noah's Ark. That's the Autism Recovery Center. We do have an office in Wexford, Pennsylvania. Check us out online. It's innovativefamilywellness.com. I'm a board-certified chiropractor in both Pennsylvania and Ohio. I also hold a medical acupuncturist license in the state of Ohio to do needle acupuncture. So that's just kind of my background there, a little bit of how I'm sort of intertwined to this whole world of functional medicine. I'm going to step outside of that box of looking at the spine, how it relates to all the organs and the acupuncture meridians, although it's all relevant to this thing tonight called surviving mold and Lyme. Thanks again for joining me. I mentioned before that Lyme often presents as like the conditions and the symptomatology and the presentation when someone's exposed to mold. So what are we looking at? Brain fog, right? Word searching, can't focus and concentrate, irritable, aggravated, wake up in the middle of the night, boom, you're awake, your body's tired, but your brain is going 1,000 miles an hour, so to speak, and you have no idea why. What else can this present as? It ends up having leaky gut, right? Think of somebody out in a field of running in a field of clover, and it's a commercial for an allergy, and they're sneezing, and they take this perfect pill, and they feel great. Well, histamine, this thing that kind of permeates through your body and is released by a specific cell called a mast cell, anyhow, it can cause leaky gut, and that can be bloating and then brain fog because the leaky gut causes leaky brain, where this semi-permeable membrane around the brain can leak and histamine infiltrates and you kind of feel yucky. But on top of that, relevant to mold specifically, you can release a cascade of inflammation. So your brain can feel like it's on fire. But what is the trigger? You can even remove yourself from the environment, which is step one when you suspect mold toxicity. So look around in your home. Go into the basement, go into the garage, and think to yourself, has there ever been an area in my home where there's been water intrusion? A leaky wall, a downspout that kind of backed up and pushed under the shingles and the gutters and came in the house that way. And a lot of people mistakenly think, I'm in a brand new home, it's beautiful. I work in a brand new office. There's no way I could have mold exposure. You sure can. Unfortunately, the way buildings are made in homes as well, when they're airtight like that, oftentimes the buildings don't breathe. So it's called sick building syndrome. So you can be in an environment that is laden with mold. There's Stachybotrys mold, and there's black mold, and there's some molds that actually aren't even that harmful. And there's green molds. But once it's identified, maybe you do the ERMI test in the house, maybe you run your local hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, something like that, and you buy little test kits and you put them in your homes. Or perhaps you're the canary in the coal mine where you walk into a room and you know for sure there's mold in there because your eyes are red and watery. Your sinuses immediately become stuffy. You get a headache. You feel off balance. You kind of feel dizzy. You feel lightheaded. And I hope I'm resonating with you people to start to think, is there mold? As I mentioned in a previous video, it seems to conjure up some defensiveness among patients. Almost like I might on this end be accusing you of not having cleanliness in your home or lacking proper hygiene in your bathroom. Doesn't have to do with that. Like I said, a new home can have it. Buildings, libraries, and schools are notorious for this. So if we go around the house and we test for this, and we use one of these environmental relative moldiness index tests called the ERMI test, the environmental relative moldiness index test there, called an ERMI, and we find out there's mold, or perhaps you're having your ductwork clean, and you find out there's mold spores, or maybe in your school. I know actually, unfortunately, where my kids go to school here in the North Hills area in Pennsylvania, it was a big thing this year. And a lot of kids are having asthma and sinus, nausea, vomiting, sickness. Teachers, librarians, secretaries, students were going home. In fact, one of my kids who plays baseball, their team member was using their asthma inhaler a whole lot more. These are all signs of this whole inflammatory response. So guess what? Not everybody in the same environment, even in that classroom in their school, would react the same way. there's a subset of the population who carries this gene called Hla typing. And it's not something that you have to go, searching to the end of the earth for. I write these scripts. It's a test we often send out for LabCorp. And it's a genotype looking for this. It's kind of this Rosetta Stone that we do. And you may have heard the name Dr. Richie Shoemaker, and it's this gene type looking for these subsets on this DR genome. And actually what's really cool, here's a clue for me. If your kids are very wheat sensitive, or you are too, breads, pastas, donuts, crackers, pretzels, pies, all the yummies, I know that, cause you problems. Maybe they cause you brain fog or eczema or bloating, which I know aren't classically necessarily all related to celiac, but you can have this, and oftentimes my people who are wheat sensitive, this same genotype, this HLA, this human leukocyte antigen, also trends with people, tending them the predisposition for reactivity to mold. So again, it's not just exposure, it's what your body does with that. And here's what it does. When it gets inside your body, we inhale it, we touch it, right? We're in the environment, so it's kind of all over us. Maybe it's on your clothes, and there's even toxic matter. Again, back to the school example, think of this. The school cleaned out the ductwork, but unfortunately, when it kicked back on again, it blew it all through the school. Or what about all summer long when buildings are closed up, even in the workplace, right? Can you imagine all that moisture in the air kind of condenses in the ductwork? It's dark, it's warm, and I always tease and say you find moss growing on the backside of a tree. So where it's warm and moist and kind of dark, it loves to thrive. So it blows through the school. The kids get brain fog, they're irritable, their asthma flares, their sinuses act up. It's a chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So your kid goes home and they're out of it, but guess what? They still feel foggy. They can't breathe. And I always tell people, and I'm a chiropractor, so I always tell this, I like this specific adjustment that I use for asthmatics, where I wrap my arms around people, kind of like a bear hug maneuver, and I say, could you imagine if someone gave you that bear hug kind of maneuver? Well, for me, I'm adjusting their mid-back, and even, believe it or not, helping to loosen up their ribs and their back, actually, so they can take better air, but if they didn't let go. You kind of feel this thing called air hunger. It's like, oh my word, I can't breathe. And for me, when I had this years ago, it was so embarrassing. I'd run up the flight of steps and I'd be winded. I'd come in and I know my patients could see the whites of my eyes would be bloodshot. You'd probably think, geez, he's some natural doctor promoting health and he's probably out drinking last night. I'm not. I was drinking purified water, probably with lemon in, or doing shots of apple cider vinegar, certainly not shots of alcohol. But what can happen is, when these chemical cascades kind of permeate through all the tissues, you can have this thing called a cytokine storm. Leukotrienes, prostaglandins, interleukin-6, 2, interleukin-17A is kind of the new player. So what do? If we think we have this, can we test for it? Yes. All right. So we run a series of blood work, things like a C3A and a C4A, and we look at tryptamine and histamine, whole blood. However, not to be leading you down a trail with a false hope that I'm going to find something, these tests are often negative. And even people who have the genotype for it sometimes are not symptomatic. Well, usually they are, but even in this case, people who don't have the predisposition genotypes are often. So what's that telling us? We have to go on symptomatology. So again, let's look at this. Brain fog, shortness of breath, air hunger, sinusitis, watery, red, irritated eyes, bloating. But what we forget about this a whole lot is the static shocks. It's so interesting, guys. Mold upsets this axis in your brain that regulates the water balance in your kidneys. So it kind of does this crazy thing. There's something in your head called MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. And when that often goes too low, it changes something called anti-diuretic hormone. So let's step back, parents. Think of your kids going out for dance or sports or football on a hot summer day or something like that, right? And you're telling them to have their electrolytes and their water and stay hydrated. Well, these kids and adults can't. It's the opposite of that. They are unable to retain their fluids. So what's a treatment? Salts and fluids. And please, and I don't mean to bash the Florida-based Gatorade, go Gators, right? Or something like that. Well, it's not the best thing. Minerals, salts, fluids. We have little packets of electrolytes at the clinic, and we use the 72 ionic trace minerals to help remineralize, because I'm not a big fan of colorings and sucrose and fructose and flavorings. That's a whole other issue with ADD, ADHD, migraine headaches. But anyhow, we have to give them salts and fluids. We want their electrolyte balance to stay right. What else happens? People are cold hands and cold feet. They always say, hey, my thyroid's fine. They tell me their iron is fine. They tell me their B12 is fine. Their magnesium level, even if you go to a super savvy practitioner, because how magnesium relaxes the muscles and the arteries and everything for tissue perfusion, and even that's all normal. So these people come to us with the static shocks and coldness and poor perfusion and shortness of breath. And oftentimes they get a chest x-ray and they're on an inhaler, and their diagnosis exercise-induced asthma or atopic asthma or environmental asthma. And the whole thing is revolving around mold. So ideally, you get out. What does that mean? When you get out, if you can get out, take things with you and trash them before you go to your new place, like books, because they're like a little sponge, and all the mycotoxins and the biotoxins, they suck that up. Clothes, get them gone, right? Okay, I know it's tough. So things that you can wipe down and maybe store in bags for a while until your body heals and recovers, that's sensible, all right? Harder surface things, and please, I have to say something. We could just all put the brakes on about our inside our bodies. When you're treating surfaces, do not use bleach. It can actually make things worse. It happened, I can tell you, right here in town, in the area here, where they went through and they used bleach. It actually causes a situation where now the spores of mold are running amok and making things worse. It's not the way to do it. I know in the natural realm, we'll see things like tea tree oil or melaleuca. You'll see all kind of recipes of lemon and vinegar. We have a whole bunch of things to give out at the office, so check us out, innovativefamilywellness.com. But back to what's all going on here. In this inflammatory system, it is true, many docs look for things like a SED rate or C-reactive protein, and it doesn't show there. And even if we do look at histamine levels and tryptase levels and these complement protein levels, it often doesn't show. So it's a thinking person's game. If you're having that response where you're getting in an area and you're brain foggy, you're confused, you go on vacation somewhere to the beach or you're away at somebody else's house, and say, you know what, I feel a little bit better. I realize it because you're less stressed and you're at the beach and you're chilling out and you're having fun, but it can also be because you're out of that environment. But now let's say you can't get out. Do your best to remediate it. I realize it's expensive, and please, something I've just learned from working with patients over the years, try to get somebody testing for the mold who's also not remediating. It kind of takes out the vested interests of saying, we found mold. Okay, makes sense. See if you can get two different parties, one to come and do your testing, and then somebody to do the remediation. Kind of makes sense, I guess. All right, so onward. What we need to do now is appreciate we've inhaled them, we've kind of ingested these things, and remember too, molds can even be on foods, right? You see those kind of molds. And if you're that person and you're suffering, think of it this way, kind of two big broad steps. Capture them and then pull them out. I know that seems like a lot. There's an organ called the liver. It is so important to have the liver working correctly inside your body. And true, you can have normal, what we call LFTs, okay? These free liver enzyme tests that we do. And you can have normal functioning. On a CT scan, you can pass it. MRI, it looks fine. But I'm talking about a functional capacity. The master antioxidant in the body, everyone say it out loud, starts with a G, not a C. Everyone always tells me vitamin C from orange juice days and grandma and ma and things like that. It's glutathione. But we have to get that liver producing it. Remember those old commercials? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I always say this. Over in another portion of the body, in the pancreas, it has to properly communicate to your liver and gallbladder. So kind of say, can you hear me now? There's a messenger, like that signal that we don't see, called cholecystokinin. It has to tell your liver to purge this junk. But when you purge the junk, you better have something to capture it, right? So if we go to the sewage treatment in the body, and we need to capture it. When we capture it, I know many of people who have tried some prescription drugs that are generally pretty safe. They're even used to bind cholesterol bile salts. But we can look at it in a really neat way, and it works great in kids too. So kids who have ADD, ADHD, mold exposure, biotoxin exposure, we're able to use little remedies in a sequential fashion, almost like when you detoxify metals, right? You know, if you have mercury, say, in your thyroid, you have aluminum suspected in your gut bugs or in your brain, you don't just all of a sudden grab and push it out. It wouldn't make sense, right, to go ahead and try to push something out if it's clogged on the other end. I tell people this. Remember back in school, we always had a couple goofballs who every now and then would pull a fire alarm. You don't pull the fire alarm if you can't get out the doors, right? So we don't push the toxins out if the exit pathways are bogged, are trapped. So we have to push and excrete. And by using certain binders, and I know in the autism world, as I treat a lot of kids with autism, I know in that world, you all heard of things like pectin, right? Citrus pectin, malate, malic acid. These are little cofactors to make that work. And I know you people are super savvy about gut health anymore. You're taking probiotics, you're drinking kombucha, you have science experiments going on in your houses and your kitchens, making fermented foods and broth and things like that. And you're drinking your bone broth, and unfortunately, they're histamine producers. So word to the wise, it's okay if you're taking probiotics and you feel worse. Let that voice within, let that body within stop. You're intuitive enough. Believe in yourself. You're smart enough. If you're drinking kombucha, if you're eating sauerkraut like the Amish make it, fermentation, right? And you feel worse, stop. If you're taking histamine-producing foods, time out here, everybody. Histamine-producing foods, yeah, you just don't have to be running through a field of clover or ragweed for histamine. Top histamine foods: shellfish, unripened bananas. By the way, we use the bananas unripened for prebiotics, and it's the overripened bananas, that has the high histamine. So it's the overripened bananas, the shellfish, milk, and peanuts. I stop everybody when we suspect a histamine disorder on those. They'll promote dietary histamines. Now, true, for those savvy, there are enzymes that we can use, although somewhat hard to get anymore, that block that histamine cascade in the gut. So there's these H receptors, we can work with that. So we change the diet, okay? But the histamine load is so important, so we have to lower that. And what can we do? Yes, it's dietarily based. Yes, it's enzyme based. But we get the guts and things to work right. So now that we capture this kind of stuff, it can pull out. And parents, I know what you're thinking, but my pediatrician didn't tell me about this. They're awesome. They're on your side. They're probably just not trained in this. Maybe they've never worked in a functional medicine clinic. Maybe they're thinking about this kind of stuff. They're on the fence about it. They haven't seen the science about it. So I used to be an EMT. And on the rig, we'd carry something called activated charcoal for poisoning. Well, guess what? In specific form, specific dose, with specific timing, you can use these kind of compounds safely for children and adults, by the way, to capture onto the toxins and pull them out. So again, what do we need? If we have exposure, try your best to get out. If you're stuck, I understand it can be costly, it can be emotional, you're leaving cherished items behind, maybe some books and things like that. My brother used to tease me and say I was going to be a lifelong student because I was in school for 11 and a half years after high school. So I get it. I love books. I love to learn and study, but you might have to separate from them, okay, guys? So it's emotional, right? I get it. But once we've identified it's there, and we have great, strong clinical suspicion it's there. We've done some genotype testing. We've done some testing in the home. We've done some of these parameters of testing. We've done a urine testing, by the way. Great way to look at it. Two good companies to really rely on, by the way, for the urine testing to see if our body's giving off kind of like the toxins from the mold, not the mold itself necessarily. And there's a great test that we run. It's a nice panel, an MMP9, to look at the allergens to the mold to see if you're allergic. So there's some cool ways to capture. So we've identified you're one of those, like the canary in the coal mine, right? We have to sort of get in what I said before, start to detox, push it out. As it's coming out, capture it and pull it out. But keep in mind, it's going to cause a lot of problems. That antihistamine to the brain can inflame it. There's some really cool things we've done over the past few years using some antioxidants in a liquid form that shut down that chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And here's the connection to Lyme. Lyme causes inflammation. Mold causes inflammation. Food allergies cause inflammation. So at the root of many diseases, stopping the cascade of inflammation is key. Dietary is big, right? Refined sugar, carbs, cakes, candies, donuts, pies, cookies, ice cream. I know all the fun food. Got to stop it. It's inflammatory. A lot of times dairy, as I said, wheat, as I said previously, corn and peanuts and shellfish and the bananas that are over-ripened, that they're very high histamine. Tomatoes are high histamine. Tomato sauce is high histamine. So don't go terribly strict. You know, in the beginning, kind of see what your predispositions are. We have tests for that, like we like the CRX testing, for example, does a nice job, and some other tests to look for these sensitivities. We'll lower the load, capture and bind, and push it out. But remember, other systems are affected. And I'm going to blow your mind here a second. We know that mold toxicity can cause many things along the branches of Lyme, and a lot of people have both. What I'm seeing is a lot of people who have Bartonella, and there's a great lab I use for the Bartonella testing. We can send a lot of this stuff off now, billable to insurance. Years ago, this was extremely expensive testing, and I get that. We try to do high yield, low cost testing in Innovative Family Wellness. And what we do when we run these panels is come back and figure out where you are in your journey. What systems are affected, or how your vitamin deficiency are, how your adrenals are to combat the stress, where your levels of inflammation are, and then what we can do is put you on a specific program. So let me share with you what this would look like. You'd come to see me, we'd do a workup, and use great clinical suspicion. I've always said this, please, you're the physician within. So give yourself the credit. Understand that you know more than many doctors. You're educated thanks to Doctors Yahoo and Doctors Google. You're very educated. You come in, we start the workup. We can do blood test, urine test, home mold testing, and symptomatology is key here. Then we put you on a program. We have to change your diet, lower inflammation, support the organs that are affected, and the big thing here I said before, we want to capture what's going on and pull that out. But shutting down inflammation is key. So if you think you're someone suffering from mold exposure, and again, libraries and schools, moms and students out there, it's huge. It's epidemic here in this area, and it is across the country. And new homes, guys, sorry, but you aren't exempt. It can be in new homes as well. Airtight buildings, as I mentioned before. We have to get this out, get it moving. I'd be more than happy to help you with this journey here. So check us out online, innovativefamilywellness.com. Check it out for mold and Lyme and how these things interrelate. So stay tuned as we do more videos. And I'd really like to do a follow-up video on autism. And this doesn't have to be what you just think is classic. I'm going to show how adults with brain fog and memory loss, focus and concentration, this can be this too. So I'll leave you here with one thought. In the next video, we're going to teach you how autism can actually present in the classic features, the delayed social, the delayed speech, the delayed growth and interactions that way. So we'll look at these behaviors and show you how these mycotoxins cross the blood-brain barrier, how these Lyme infections can release toxins, create inflammation, go in cystic forms, biofilm forms, go in hiding in the cells, intracellular forms, and distort the function and actually create the presentation of autism. So check me out online. It's drnoahsark.com, that's Autism Recovery Center, or the other website, Innovative Family Wellness. And again, as I mentioned, if you have kids, I do too. Rest assured, I've taken painstaking effort to find liquids, transdermals, pills, homeopathics, creams, salves. I get it. Kids can't swallow those horse pills like you might be able to. Be glad to help and looking forward to helping you obtain optimal health. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If it has, share it with somebody who you might think or suspect is suffering from mold and mycotoxicity. In yours and health, Dr. Noah, take care. Bye.